So imagine leading with greater clarity, greater purpose, in more places, more often, and with more impact. Imagine. What would that be like for you? What difference would that make for you? How about the people around you? Leading more clearly, with more purpose, in more places. I believe it's possible. In fact, I'm convinced it's possible. Why, you ask? Because not only have I been able to do this with some degree of consistency, but I've also had the good fortune of working with thousands of leaders around the country to help them lead with more clarity, more purpose, and more impact more often. My mission for our time together today is to share some of that with you. But before I do, I'd like to create a little bit more of a context. The world that we live in is hungry for leadership. Your leadership, my leadership, our leadership. I think with very few exceptions, everyone in this room would agree that indeed the world we live in is hungry for leadership. But I'd like to start by getting a little more context and ask a question. With a show of hands, how many leaders do we have here today? With a show of hands. Okay, let me ask the question another way. How many people in this room have influence? That's more like it. Great. Okay, now that we've created that context, so now we have a room full of leaders. And let me just share with you that one of the greatest lessons that I've learned about leadership over the last 30 years is that leadership is a choice. And it has a lot to do with influence. And so based on the fact that we got 98% of you to raise your hand, I'll just assume that the other 2% are drinking decaf. And as a result, you'll be coming along with me just shortly. But I've got to create some more context. Over the last 25 to 30 years, I've devoted all of my career to exploring the vast realm of leadership with one key question in mind. Namely, what separates great leaders from all the rest? You can be sure that in 30 years of doing this work, I've learned a few things about leadership. You can also be sure that I'm going to be sharing a few of those lessons with you today. However, my time with you this morning is far less about me and far more about you. In fact, it's really all about you. The foundation of leadership that I think is in demand and is so critical during these deep, turbulent times are founded or anchored in foundational aspects of leadership like authenticity, like integrity, like kindness and respect, congruence, to name a few. And I think as we begin our time together this morning, if we use that as a guidepost, we'll begin to see that in fact, we all can lead. So while the need and the urgency have never been greater, our ability to lead with these characteristics, with clarity and congruence, has never been harder or more challenging. A recent article in Forbes magazine said that we live in a perfect storm of distractions. Each of us here, everyone we know, is bombarded with an accelerating range or gamut of the dizzying array of technology and the constant drive for greater productivity and efficiency. To say that our level of distraction has increased over the last few months or year would sadly be an understatement. In fact, it's accelerated. Add to this, the National Science Foundation tells us that on average, we have somewhere between 35,000 and 50,000 thoughts every day. If you add all of that up, I think you'd be very quick to agree with me that indeed we live in a perfect storm of distraction. Despite all of these realities, I'm here to tell you that there's good news. There's good news in all of this. And first and foremost, that good news begins with acknowledging that none of us are alone. Everyone we know is facing the same type of challenge. And I think the reality is that every one of us has this unparalleled opportunity to lead with those characteristics that I described a moment ago. To help you to lead with more clarity, more purpose, in more places, more often, and with more impact. That's my mission today. How many of you think that that would be a good outcome for our time together this morning? Terrific. Let's begin. So in my work with leaders all over the country, you can imagine that this topic of the distractions that we face is a front burner issue for many people. In fact, it's been a front burner issue for me for a pretty long time. It came to my attention perhaps 5 years ago that my life was a series of distractions, one after another, from the moment I got up in the morning till the time I went to bed. And I realized that if I didn't do something about it, if I didn't pay attention to it, I would be in a place where I wasn't able to lead with clarity and purpose, or more specifically, to be able to be the role model for the behaviors that I wish to see in others. Let me repeat that. I believe that leadership is a lot about being the role model for the behavior we wish to see in others. And when we're distracted, our distractions prevent us from doing that. Our distractions prevent us from being the positive role models that we're capable of being and that our teams and other people's in our lives deserve for us to be. As I said a moment ago, it's not unusual for me to hear this from clients. In fact, I often am amused by some of the stories I hear about just how distracted people are. And I'm reminded of one that I heard not long ago from a client who approached me after my program and said, "You've got to meet my husband. He's the most distracted human being you will ever meet." And of course, my first thought was, does he know you feel that way? But I said, okay, so obviously there's a terrific story behind this. Please share it. Well, she said that they had come back from their summer vacation, and like many of us, when we go away on vacation, we put the dog in the kennel. And so the husband came back, they came back from vacation, and the husband was so distracted that he went to the kennel and brought home the wrong dog. And it wasn't until their daughter, their teenage daughter, came home later that afternoon and said, what's up with this dog? Whose dog is this? That's not Coco. And then the husband, to his credit, said, well, I was kind of having a hard time getting the dog in the car. Maybe that's why. So I'll tell you what, that was a highlight of my day because I was feeling a little bit distracted that day. And then when I realized that in fact there's somebody who would pick up the wrong dog at the kennel, I thought, I'm not doing too bad. Another one, you're getting a kick out of this, so I'm going to share another one with you. I had an experience at the bank recently where on Saturday morning, I don't know how many of you do this, but on Saturday morning, I have this wild, crazy idea that I'm going to get 75 things done before noon, and then I can relax in the afternoon. All right, so maybe it's not 75, it's 62. But needless to say, I have a lot of stuff that I want to get done, and oftentimes it includes the bank. Well, anyway, one morning not long ago, I was at the bank, and I pulled in, it was about 10 o'clock, and I looked at the two teller lines, the drive-up lines, and I realized, much to my pleasant surprise, that there was only one car in each side. So I thought, well, this is going to be easier than going inside. Well, anyway, I pulled up behind one of the cars, and as I was waiting there, the person got their transaction and got the tube back, and then, much to my sense of humor or chagrin, I laughed when he drove off with the tube. I figured, okay, he has 75 things on his list to do. I'm not sure if there's a black market for those tubes, those dipole tubes, but perhaps maybe it's something that I didn't know about. I think the point is this: it's all around us. And the point that I made a moment ago that's I think so important to reinforce is that it's the norm, it's the reality. But the good news, again, is we're not alone. The good news is that we can do something about it. And I think that everyone here is asking that question. So how do we deal with it, Dave? What can we do about it? But I think there's a better question. I think there's another question that has to go before that. I think that question is why. Why should we do something about it? Why should we care? Well, I'm going to come back to the point I made a moment ago, and that is leadership is a choice. Every single one of us, every single day, has an opportunity to lead, to be the role models for the people around us, to set the tone, to set the pace, whether you have direct reports or no direct reports, or regardless of where you are in your career, regardless of whether you work or not. Every single person here is a leader. Every single person here has influence. And we begin to realize the truth, the reality that we all agreed to a little while ago, that in fact, the world that we live in is hungry for leadership, our leadership. That, I believe, is the call to leadership. I think it's also important to remember that leadership is the opportunity to be the role model for the behaviors we wish to see in others. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. In my work, I use a lot of quotes because they get us to think. And one of my favorite quotes is by his Pulitzer Prize winner Alvin Schweitzer, who said one time, "Example is not the main thing in influencing others, it's the only thing." Let me repeat that. Example is not the main thing in influencing others, it's the only thing. What that really speaks to is the power of our influence, and our influence in how we use it. Do we demonstrate leadership? Do we live with congruence and clarity? Or do our actions and behaviors contradict our words? I'm reminded of a story from my first book, The Navigator's Handbook, that's a good illustration. It's an amusing but powerful illustration of the critical importance of congruence. So guess what? I'm going to tell you the story. Maria was a mid-level manager working at one of the corporations in downtown Hartford. And on her way to work one morning, she realized, just about the time she realized that traffic was heavier than normal, she remembered that she had promised her boss that she was going to cover a meeting for her. Well, right about that time, she realized that it was just a lot of traffic. But then she thought, well, if I could just make it up to this intersection up here, this very busy intersection, perhaps I can take a shortcut and then make my way to work and maybe get there on time. So as she made her way up through the heavy traffic, she was now the second car in line at the red light. And she thought, well, at least I'm up to the front now. I'll certainly make it through when the light turns green. Well, as the light turned green, the car in front of her stalled. Poor Maria was furious. But as the light turned red again, the car restarted and pulled through. At least now she was the first car in line. She was really starting to get nervous. But again, remembering that maybe if she just got through this intersection, she could take Terry Road and take a few shortcuts and make it there on time. Well, as the light turned green, much to her surprise and frustration, a school bus pulled into the middle of the intersection and put on its lights, signaling a pickup or a drop-off, completely blocking Maria. Well, what seemed to be like an hour for her was only a few minutes. When she decided that she didn't see anybody getting on or off the bus, she blew the horn a few times. Not getting the bus driver's attention, she rolled down her window, it was an older car, and she started to scream and yell and blow the horn. And there were some choice words coming from the car, screaming at the top of her lungs, "Move the beep, beep, beep bus." Well, right about that time, there was a loud pounding on the back of her car. And as Maria turned to investigate, there was a Hartford police officer who took her out of the car, put her in handcuffs, and brought her immediately to the back of her car, his squad car. Now, poor Maria was not only not going to make that shortcut or make that meeting, she was in the back of a police car. But fortunately for her, it was only about 30 seconds before Sergeant Smith showed up, took her out of the car, took her out of the handcuffs, and apologized to her for the misunderstanding. But he said to her, "Ma'am, I have to ask you, were you aware that Officer Jones was directly behind you when you were at the light?" And she said, "Well, no, what's the point?" And he said, "Ma'am, he saw your behavior with that bus driver and couldn't help but notice on the back of your car, you had bumper stickers that said, 'Practice random acts of kindness, temptation doesn't hurt you,' and he thought your car was stolen." So, here's the question. I'm talking into this as if it's on. I guess I can do this now. I have to turn it down. So the question is, what do your bumper stickers say? We all have bumper stickers. And here's the truth. They either allow us to lead with congruence or they contradict our words. In studying leadership for 30 years, one of the clear lessons that I have learned that separates great leaders from all the rest, one of those characteristics is that they lead with congruence in every single role. In fact, when I was writing my first book, the original, as some of you know, and again, I forgot to say, it's nice to see so many colleagues here. Thank you for coming. I'm sorry I didn't acknowledge that in the beginning. I'm looking at some familiar smiles. It's great to see you. But as some of you know, when I was writing the first book, the original intent was to interview 100 CEOs, find out what the common denominators of leadership were, distill it from those interviews, and come back and write the book. Well, it took on a completely different course because what I learned fairly early on, which was not part of my interview set or question set, was that these leaders were defined as great leaders outside of work too. And when I began to investigate and dig deeper, I learned that not only were they really clear on their values, but they're clear on how they live those values. And that's the connection to congruence. So I told you that story. I told you my mission today to help you lead with more clarity, more purpose, in more places more often, and with more impact. But I need your help. I need your help to make that happen. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to tell you a few other stories, but beginning with the fact that, as we all know, as many of us know, conventional thinking tells us that it takes on average 21 days to form a new habit. Is it easy? Sometimes, sometimes not. But if we take a 21-day challenge, and that's my challenge to you, I'm going to ask you to take the 21-day challenge. And what that 21-day challenge involves is very simple. If you would look at the inside of your centerpiece, I hid some cards. They're called my compass calibration cards. And those compass calibration cards were stuffed inside of you have to look inside. They're on the side. Everybody should have one. I put plenty in there. I have plenty more that are available. I'd like everybody to please find them when you have them. Is there anybody that does not have one? Does everybody have one? So this comes out of an experience. I said to you earlier that this idea of being distracted has been a front burner issue for me for probably close to 5 years. And it came to my attention that unless I did something about it, I was not going to spend a lot of time on the leadership path. And being on the leadership path is really simply about letting me lead in every role I play. Because every single one of us has the capacity to lead in every role we play. I used to think earlier in my career that leadership was limited to Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, 9 to 5, whatever our hours were. How many of you worked 8 to 4 lately? Probably none of you, right? 8 to 7, 8 to 8, right? But the point is this. When we decide, when we choose to be leaders, here's something to remember. When we choose to be leaders, there's no off switch on it. It's a 24/7 opportunity and responsibility. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to tell you about this compass calibration technique. When I came to that realization about 5 years ago that if I wasn't doing something about it, my distractions would have me off the leadership path some mornings by 10 o'clock, sometimes by 7 o'clock, and I became very, very committed to trying to find a pathway of spending more time on the leadership path. So over about 3 or 4 months of talking to friends, doing a lot of praying, I came up with this process here. And I've been doing this every single morning of my life for about 5 years now. And I share this with you with the hope that you will take my 21-day challenge. But let me tell you what each of the questions involve. So every morning of every day for the last 5 years, I devote 20 minutes of quiet time. I call it me time. I call it Dave time. To exploring these 4 questions. And the first question is, what's important to me today? And I don't just rush to that and answer it. I think about what's important to me today. And then once I start to get some clarity, I ask the question, why is it important to me today? And the neat thing about the first question, when I start to consider what's important to me today, that gets me in touch with my values. Because that's where they are. It's the moral compass. You heard the first book is the Navigator's Compass, the second book is the first book is the Navigator's Handbook. I should know that by now. And the second book is the Navigator's Compass. And navigating is simply using your moral compass to guide you and calibrating it frequently so that it's always on your true north, and hopefully one that's grounded in things like integrity. But the whole point is this. Once I start to get clear on what's important to me today, that connects me with my values. When I begin to get clear on why is it important, that connects me with my purpose. And when I begin my day with clarity around what's important to me, my values, why it's important to me, my purpose, it gives me a tremendous amount of clarity into how I need to show up. So those of you that received the complimentary copy of the book, the article is actually in there, Deliberate Leadership in a Distracted World, which this talk is based on. And in that was now 2 years ago, I had a simpler version of it. I had just 3 questions. But I added the 4th because you'll see, for those of you that have that, or if you want to buy it later, it's out there. The 3rd question was, how do I need to show up? So it's what's important to me, why is it important, how do I need to show up? But I began to think about how do I need to show up really in the context of my behavior, and specifically my reputation. So the 3rd question on the compass calibration card is, what is it that I want to be known for today? what is it that I want to be known for? Because I talk to leaders all the time in my work. A fair amount of my work is coaching. I do a lot of this speaking work. I do a good amount of training too. But I have conversations with leaders. I was working with an executive team at Catholic Charities a couple of days ago. We did an offsite, and I asked them, so what is it that you want to be known for? But let's start and ask this question. What is it that you are known for? And how do you know? Because deliberate leadership is about knowing, and deliberate leadership is about acting on it. And so that third question gets clear on how do I need to show up? And then finally, the fourth question, how do I achieve congruence? And congruence, I have to tell you, is a powerful word. So much so that over the last dozen years, I've had a leadership word of the year every single year that has guided me. It's been a centerpiece of my thinking, my exploration, my writing, and my conversations. And congruence was actually a leadership word of the year for 2013 and 2014. It was so powerful because I think that ultimately congruence matters. So here's my challenge to you. I would like everyone here to consider what will it take for you to take the 21-day challenge. I'd like everyone here to commit to 15 minutes. I said 20. I know I often hear from people who say, oh, well, I can't do it. I don't have 20 minutes. I wish I had 20 minutes. That's a choice too. But if you can take 15 minutes every single day for the next 21 days and spend 15 minutes thinking about this, I really believe with great conviction that your amount of clarity and capacity to lead in more places with more power, with more impact, will only increase. I'd like to also share with you one other thought that is a good reminder. I often talk about deliberate leadership, and in a workshop that I do on this topic, I have a series of other actions that you take. And so here's one that I'm going to leave with you that's also from the first book. If you have a pen and paper with you, I'd like you to write down WMIS, AM, and FM. WMIS, AM, and FM. It's a story from my first book, and it's based on the belief that for a very, very long period of time, I've been of the belief, the experience, and then of the belief that every single one of us wakes up every single day with a screen in our head that tells us how we're doing. It tells us how we're doing. So I woke up at 4:15 this morning, and my first thought was, the alarm doesn't go off for 15 minutes. Then I thought, wait a second, I'm playing the Oakville. I saw Natalie Cole here once. You could be sure that's going to be topic for Thanksgiving dinner, right? Dave played the Oakville. None of my family are here. Thanks, everybody. But at any rate, you're here, and that's what matters. So I have this belief that every one of us every day shows up with this screen in our head that tells us how we're doing. So that WMIS is what's my internal screen? What's my internal screen? And I'm of the belief that there's either one or the other. There's AM and there's FM. I'll tell you the FM first. The FM is the fear mode. The FM is I wake up this morning and I say, oh, it's 15 minutes, I could have got it better. Oh, imagine how much better I would have felt if I got an extra 15 minutes. Oh my gosh, is it going to be raining this morning? Oh, I forgot to get milk. I'm going to have 1% in my coffee. What a drag, right? Oh, what a bummer. And then I go downstairs and my dog is there, and the dog wants to go out for a walk, and I'm thinking, I'm too tired to take you for a walk. And now the rest of my day is in that mode. But the other side of the equation is the AM mode, and that's the appreciation mode. That's a place where we're coming at it from a place of clarity and gratitude. So the appreciation mode is me waking up at 3:15 or 4:15 this morning and going, I am the luckiest guy in Bloomfield, Connecticut. Maybe the world, because I get to do what I love to do. This is my life's work. I am absolutely convinced that my purpose was to come here and talk to you about how you lead with more clarity, more purpose, in more places, more often, and with more impact. Thank you for letting me be with you this morning.
Great job. Did I tell you he was enthusiastic and positive? We got time for a couple of questions. Anybody got a burning question for Dave?
I just want to hear what you mean by congruence.
So congruence is that my words and actions are aligned. So congruence is What I say is what I do is what I say. Oftentimes, so one of my guiding principles is kindness. So I can tell you that I want to stand for kindness. But if I'm not kind, if I'm rude, if I'm blowing the horn at that school bus driver, and I'm not saying thank you, I mean, that's normal, it's human, and I do it. Look, you know, one of the things that's important to note is when I started this, I said, is it possible? And I said, yes, it is. I'm convinced it is because I've done it. But I added another word, and some of you didn't remember this because you were still drinking decaf. And that is, I said with some degree of consistency. So I want to be clear that despite that this whole idea of navigating incongruence has been in every fiber of my body for a long time, and I've written 2 books on it and 15 or 20 articles, I'm human. And so the truth of the matter is I don't get it right every day. And some days it's a lot of work. In fact, you'll read the article in the book. I mentioned that on some days I don't even get past the first question. Why? Because I am so distracted. I got too much going on. My head's going at 180. I'm a list guy, so I often sometimes, if I start my day with my list, I don't do very well with the compass calibration. Because I'm thinking about what did I leave off the list? What's to prioritize? How do I prioritize it? So that's the story of congruence. What else?
Another question.
Another question. Questions are free today. Normally they're 59 cents. And decaf, that's exactly right. Anything else?
Hey Dave, maybe I can ask you something.
Please do, Tony.
So, you know, we tend to think about leadership and people that are in high positions. And what I learned from you the other day is that it doesn't matter your position in life, you can be a leader.
In any role.
Can you elaborate?
Yeah, so Tony and I had you're a leader. So quick story before I tell you that. So we're at NBC and we're getting ready to go on. And so we're having this really nice conversation like we had been old friends for a long time. And I said, so you got 3 minutes, I got 1 minute? And he says, Dave, it's your story. All I got to tell him is it's Wallingford. We're going to the Oakdale. You take all the time. And I said, no, Tony, this is your show. He said, no, Dave, it's your story. That's leadership. But I also told him about the Picasso sandwich maker, which is an illustration of the fact that anybody can be a leader. I was at a client location several months ago, and I, for some unknown reason, just being the overachiever that I try to be sometimes, I booked 7 back-to-back coaching meetings. I don't know what on earth I was thinking. It was out of town, so I just tried to get them all in so I could save some time on travel. Well, anyway, I did. So after the 4 in the morning, I knew I had to eat something. I forgot to bring like a snack bar, so I decided I would go down to the company cafeteria. Well, I was dazed by then, all right? I go down to the cafeteria and I look there and they've got like 152 choices. I have no idea. I just know I have to eat and I've got to get back upstairs. So the woman behind the counter, she says, you look like you need some help. I said, well, you're very perceptive. Yes, I do. I'm hungry. I have no idea what I should eat, but I need to eat something. And I can't have bacon, okay? I can't have French fries. I got to eat like kind of healthy, but I need to eat fast. So she proceeds to say, you know what? We got this beautiful turkey. We just roasted it this morning. We have these spinach wraps that are super fresh. I had one myself. I could toast it for you. I could grill it for you. Do you like pesto? I could do pesto on it for you. Now she's getting into making this sandwich, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I needed to come here. Thank God for this woman. I'm going to eat something not just like fast, but really good. So she's making it, she's going, you know what would be good with this? I could do some honey mustard on the side. And she's getting into it, and I said, my God, you are the Picasso sandwich maker. She goes, what do you mean by that? I said, start off by telling you it's a compliment. She goes, well, tell me more. And I said, you made that sandwich like Picasso painted. That's leadership.